The restaurant existed in a world apart from the street outside, sealed behind heavy glass doors and a silent host who judged you before you spoke. Inside, everything moved slower, smoother. Conversations were quiet, laughter restrained. Crystal caught the light above white tablecloths so crisp they looked untouched, like no one had dared wrinkle them. This was a place where people came not just to eat, but to be seen knowing how to eat. She adjusted her apron at the service station, fingers steady despite the weight in her chest. It was the start of the evening rush, the hour when the wealthy arrived in waves, already impatient, already certain the world would bend to their schedule. She checked the table assignments again, memorizing faces, preferences, habits. Some guests wanted silence. Some wanted to talk down to you. Some pretended you were furniture. She had learned early which was worse. As she moved toward her section, heels quiet against polished wood, fragments of conversation brushed past her, stock prices, private jets, weekend plans and places she once walked as a student, not a tourist. The irony pressed lightly but constantly against her ribs. The corner table caught her attention immediately. Not because it was larger or more ornate, but because of the way the room seemed to angle toward it. Other guests glanced there before sitting, servers approached it with caution, the manager lingered within eyesight. Power sat at that table, comfortable and unquestioned. 4 guests. Expensive suits. A woman wrapped in understated luxury. And at the center, a man whose presence felt immovable, like the restaurant had been built around him rather than the other way around. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. People leaned in automatically. She picked up the water tray and walked toward them, posture straight, expression neutral. She had learned that too, never apologetic, never defensive. Calm unsettled people more than anything. She placed the glasses carefully, one by one. "Good evening," she said. "May I start you with sparkling or still?" The woman smiled thinly. "Sparkling." One of the men nodded without looking up. The other murmured agreement. The man at the center said nothing. His attention was fixed on the menu, brows knit slightly, as though the words were there for his entertainment alone. She waited, patient. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Tell me," he said, eyes still on the page, "is the chef staying true to French tradition tonight, or has he decided to experiment again?" It wasn't really a question. It was a test, wrapped in casual arrogance. She turned back fully. "The menu remains traditional this evening, sir. Minor seasonal adjustments only." He looked up now, studying her for the first time. Not with interest, with assessment. His gaze moved over her face, her uniform, her hands. One of the men beside him smirked. "She knows the script at least." The woman laughed softly. "That's what they train them for." The man at the center tilted his head. "You understand French cuisine?" "Yes," she replied. The pause that followed was small but sharp. Like the moment before a glass cracks. He smiled then, amused. "Really?" She met his eyes. "Yes." He leaned back in his chair. "Fascinating. Because I was under the impression this menu wasn't exactly accessible." One of the men chuckled. "You know. Pronunciations. Details." The woman waved a hand dismissively. "Just point to the dish, dear." The word dear landed heavier than intended. She felt the familiar heat rise at the base of her spine, the instinctive tightening. Not anger, control. Anger wasted energy. Control kept you standing. "I'm happy to assist," she said evenly. "If you'd like recommendations." The man raised an eyebrow. "You'd recommend?" "Yes." He exchanged a glance with his companions, enjoying the performance. "All right. Let's see. Tell me about the duck." She inhaled once, slow and silent. "The duck confit is prepared traditionally, cured overnight and cooked slowly in its own fat. This evening it's paired with a light juice and seasonal vegetables." The woman blinked. One of the men stopped smiling. "And the pronunciation?" The man pressed, voice smooth. "Go on." She didn't rush. "Confit," she said softly but clearly. Perfectly. The man's eyes narrowed just slightly. That's close enough, he said. Now tell me, what wine would you pair with it? The question carried weight now. This was no longer idle curiosity. This was public. Nearby tables had begun to listen, forks pausing, ears turning without faces following. She could feel it. The room always knew when something was about to happen. A Burgundy Pinot Noir, she said. Preferably from Côte de Nutes. It complements the richness without overpowering the dish. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was startled. One of the men cleared his throat. That's specific. The woman leaned back, studying her openly now. Where did you learn that? She didn't answer immediately. Not because she couldn't, but because she recognized the trap. The assumption hung in the air already, waiting to be confirmed or denied. The man spoke again, switching languages with deliberate ease, his tone edged with satisfaction. He expected the shift to land like a closed door. She answered him in the same language, her voice steady, unaccented, alive with fluency. The effect was immediate. A chair scraped softly at a nearby table. Someone whispered. The woman's mouth fell open before she caught herself. The man stared at her, no longer amused. Something else had replaced it, uncertainty. She finished her response calmly, then added, Would you like to hear the chef's suggestion as well? He didn't answer right away. Yes, he said finally. As she turned away, she felt the room exhale behind her. Not relief. Shock. In the kitchen, another server grabbed her wrist, eyes wide. What did you just do? She smiled faintly. My job. You embarrassed him. No, she said quietly. He embarrassed himself. She returned to the table with the wine list, the air around them changed. The woman avoided her gaze now. One of the men looked almost impressed. The man at the center watched her like a puzzle he hadn't planned on solving tonight. You speak French, he said, not a question. Yes. Where did you learn it? She placed the list down carefully. In France. The woman laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Doing what? She met her eyes. Studying. The man leaned forward. At which institution? The name she spoke was soft, unadorned. It didn't need embellishment. The reaction was immediate. Genuine surprise. A crack in certainty. The man sat back slowly. Then why are you here? The question lingered between them, heavier than any insult so far. She felt the weight of it settle, familiar and sharp. She had been asked that question in a dozen forms, in rooms far less beautiful than this one. She looked at him steadily. Because life changes, she said. And because dignity isn't tied to a job title. For the first time that evening, he had no reply ready. The room seemed to lean in again, sensing the unfinished moment. She excused herself, heart steady, knowing this was only the beginning. The tension didn't fade after she stepped away. It followed her like a second shadow, clinging to the back of her neck as she moved between tables. She could feel eyes on her now, curious, speculative, some quietly rooting for her, others waiting for her to slip. This was the part people never understood. One moment of surprise didn't erase the hunger for humiliation. It sharpened it. When she returned to the service station, the manager caught her gaze. A question flickered there, unspoken but clear. Are you all right? She gave a slight nod. She didn't trust her voice just yet. The table in the corner was no longer simply dining. It had become a stage. She poured wine at another table, answered a request for bread, smiled when required. But her awareness stayed locked on that corner. The billionaire leaned back now, no longer reading the menu. He was watching the room instead, observing reactions, noting who had noticed. Power hated surprises. Power hated losing control even more. When she approached again with the wine bottle he had selected, he didn't let her speak first. Stay a moment, he said. The woman beside him shifted uncomfortably. Is that necessary? Yes, he replied, eyes never leaving her face. She placed the bottle down, professional, unflustered. Of course. He gestured toward the empty glass. Pour. She did smoothly, the wine whispering against crystal. Her hands didn't shake. They never did anymore. You didn't hesitate, he said. She looked up. About the wine? No. About the language? The woman scoffed. Maybe she memorized a few phrases. He held up a hand, silencing her without looking. No, he said slowly. That wasn't memorization. One of the men leaned forward now, curiosity overtaking caution. Where exactly did you study? She met his gaze. Paris. That's vague. It's sufficient. The woman bristled. Watch your tone. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the woman. My tone hasn't changed. A few nearby diners glanced over again. The tension was spreading outward, subtle but undeniable, like a crack traveling through glass. The billionaire smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're comfortable challenging people. She considered that. I'm comfortable answering questions honestly. Even when it costs you? The question carried an edge now, personal and sharp. This wasn't about French anymore. This was about hierarchy. She paused, just a fraction longer than before. Especially then. The silence stretched. The woman crossed her arms. One of the men shifted in his seat, suddenly aware that this exchange was no longer entertaining. It was dangerous. For him, for them, for the carefully maintained order of things. The billionaire switched languages again, faster this time, his words clipped, layered with idiom and nuance. He was pushing harder now, deliberately choosing phrasing meant to confuse, to trip her, to expose a flaw. She answered without faltering. Not only answered, she corrected him gently on a point of regional usage. A murmur rippled through the surrounding tables. The billionaire froze. For the first time since she'd approached, his face revealed something raw. Not anger. Something closer to being unseated. The woman laughed nervously. All right, this has gone far enough. We're here to eat. He didn't acknowledge her. His gaze stayed fixed on her, studying, recalibrating. You're enjoying this, he said. No, she replied. I'm enduring it. The words landed heavier than any clever retort could have. He leaned back slowly. You understand how this looks? She met his stare. Do you understand how it sounds? The question hung there, daring him to answer honestly. A manager appeared at the edge of the table, sensing the disturbance. Is everything all right here? Yes, the billionaire said smoothly. Perfectly. The manager looked to her. She nodded once. As they spoke, another guest, an older man from a nearby table, cleared his throat. Excuse me, he said, addressing the billionaire. But she's right. Your phrasing was off. Southern influence, perhaps? The billionaire glanced at him, startled. The man smiled politely, raising his glass toward her in quiet acknowledgement. Something shifted then. The room's allegiance tilted, subtle but real. The billionaire exhaled slowly. Interesting, he murmured. Very interesting. He turned back to her. Why wait tables? The question came again, but sharper now, edged with suspicion. Not curiosity. Not mockery. Threat. She felt the old ache stir in her chest. The memory of acceptance letters. Of late nights spent translating texts by lamplight. Of promises made and broken. Of one phone call that had changed everything. She didn't owe him any of it. Because survival doesn't ask permission, she said. The woman shook her head. This is absurd. If you're so educated, you should be doing something better. She met the woman's gaze, unblinking. Better for whom? The woman flushed. For yourself? She smiled then, small and controlled. I am. The billionaire laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. You're deflecting. No, she said. I'm choosing. He watched her closely now, as though she were a variable he hadn't accounted for. Do you know how many people would kill for the education you claim to have? Yes, she said. I sat beside some of them. That answer struck something deeper. The man beside him looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. The billionaire drummed his fingers against the table. "You're telling me you walked away from everything?" "No," she replied. "I lost it." The word was quiet, but it carried weight. Loss didn't need explanation. Loss was universal. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the woman scoffed again, sharp and brittle. "This is all very dramatic, but let's be honest. People like you don't end up here by accident." The air went still. The billionaire turned his head slowly toward the woman. "Enough." She blinked, startled. I said enough?" The rebuke was soft but absolute. She fell silent immediately. He looked back at her. "You're not what I expected." She nodded. "No one ever is." He stood suddenly, the movement drawing attention from across the room. A few people gasped softly, unsure whether they were witnessing a confrontation or a dismissal. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a card. He held it between his fingers, not offering it yet. "You've made this evening memorable," he said. She didn't reach for the card. She didn't move at all. "And you," she replied, "have made it revealing." A flicker of something like respect crossed his face. Or maybe irritation. It was hard to tell. The line between the two was thin. He placed the card on the table instead. "We'll talk again," he said. She inclined her head politely. "Enjoy your meal." As she walked away, she felt the weight of the room shift fully now. Not everyone approved. Not everyone understood. But no one laughed anymore. Behind her, the billionaire sat back down slowly, staring at the card he'd just given away like it was a question he hadn't meant to ask. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever came next would not be quiet. The shift in the room didn't disappear when she stepped away from the corner table. It deepened. Conversations resumed, but softer now, edged with awareness. People glanced at her as she passed, some with curiosity, some with something closer to respect, others with irritation at having their comfortable assumptions disturbed. She felt it all and carried on anyway, the way she always did, upright, precise, unyielding. She delivered plates to another table, describing dishes with practiced ease. Her voice stayed even, her hands steady. Years ago, moments like this would have rattled her, made her second-guess every word, every step. Tonight there was no room for doubt. Doubt belonged to people who had never lost everything and rebuilt themselves quietly. From the corner of her eye, she saw him watching her again. Not openly now. Carefully. As if studying a painting from different angles, trying to understand how it had been made. When dessert orders began, the manager approached her, lowering his voice. "He asked about you." She looked up. "What did you say?" "That you're one of our most reliable servers," he replied. Then, after a beat, "and that you have an interesting background." She smiled faintly. "That's one way to put it." The manager hesitated. "If you'd rather not." "I'll handle it," she said. She always did. When she returned to the corner table, the dynamic had shifted again. The woman sat stiffly now, her earlier confidence replaced by irritation she couldn't disguise. One of the men avoided eye contact altogether. The other studied his plate as though answers might be etched into porcelain. The man at the center looked up as she approached. "Dessert," he said. "Surprise me." She nodded. "Of course." As she turned, he added quietly, "Stay." She paused, then faced him again. "You're not from here," he said. She didn't bother asking what he meant. "No. Your accent," he continued. "It's layered. You've lived in more than one place." "Yes." "How many?" "Enough." The woman sighed sharply. "Why does this matter?" He didn't look at her. "Because people don't end up where they don't belong by accident." The sentence lingered, loaded. She met his gaze. "That assumes belonging is something assigned." A faint smile touched his mouth. "You're careful with words." "I learned to be." "Where?" She exhaled slowly. "In rooms where a single mistake costs more than pride." One of the men glanced up. What rooms? She looked at him briefly. The kind with exams written in languages you're told you'll never master. The kind where your presence is always questioned. Silence settled again. The man at the center leaned forward, elbows on the table. Tell me the truth, he said. What happened? The question wasn't a challenge this time. It was something else. A genuine fracture in his certainty. She considered him for a moment. There was no obligation here. No requirement to expose herself for the sake of someone else's curiosity. And yet, something in the air, perhaps the way the room had tilted, perhaps the way power had faltered, made honesty feel less like surrender and more like choice. I was on a scholarship, she said finally. Full funding. Tuition. Housing. Books. The woman scoffed. And you lost it? Yes. How? The man asked. She didn't answer immediately. The memory rose anyway, sharp and unwelcome. A hospital corridor. The smell of disinfectant. A phone pressed to her ear while professors spoke of deadlines and policies and regret. My mother got sick, she said. Very sick. The room stilled in a way that felt different this time. Less voyeuristic. More human. I work nights, she continued. I miss classes. I asked for extensions. Some were granted. Others weren't. The man nodded slowly. And the scholarship? Didn't wait. The woman opened her mouth, then closed it again. I stayed as long as I could, she said. But visas don't bend for grief. Money doesn't stretch forever. Eventually, I had to choose between pretending everything was fine and going home. One of the men swallowed. You chose home. Yes. The man at the center studied her, his expression unreadable. And when you came back? She shrugged lightly. Reality doesn't care about potential. It cares about rent. The woman looked away. You could have leveraged your education, he said. Connections. People. She smiled, not unkindly. People don't always answer calls from those who fall off the map. That landed harder than she expected. She felt it herself, the old sting of unanswered emails, of polite refusals that masked discomfort. The man exhaled slowly. You rebuilt. I survived. Those aren't the same. No, she agreed. But one comes before the other. Desserts arrived, breaking the moment briefly. Plates were set down. Silverware adjusted. The room breathed again. He picked up his fork but didn't eat. You're still reading, he said suddenly. She blinked. What? Your vocabulary. Your rhythm. You never stop learning. She inclined her head. Books are cheaper than therapy. A corner of his mouth lifted despite himself. You could have hidden, he said. Tonight, I mean. You didn't. She met his gaze steadily. I'm tired of shrinking to make other people comfortable. The woman shifted, clearly unsettled. You speak as if you're the only one who's struggled. She turned toward her fully now, calm but firm. I speak as someone who refuses to be reduced. The billionaire raised a hand, stopping the woman before she could respond. She's right. The woman stared at him. You're taking her side? I'm acknowledging reality. He looked back at her. You challenged me tonight. I answered you, she corrected. He smiled slowly. Most people don't know the difference. He reached into his jacket again, but this time he didn't pull out a card. He pulled out his phone, glanced at it, then placed it face down on the table. I built my life on pattern recognition, he said. On seeing what others miss. She said nothing. And tonight, he continued, I miss you. The admission hung in the air, heavy and rare. I assumed, he went on, that intelligence announces itself. That excellence wears certain clothes, speaks in certain tones. She nodded once. Many people do. He looked around the room briefly, then back at her. You've embarrassed me. She met his eyes. You're not the first. A quiet laugh escaped him, genuine this time. I'd like to correct that, he said. She raised an eyebrow slightly. How? By listening. The word landed softly, but it carried weight. The woman pushed her chair back. This is ridiculous, she muttered. We're done here. She stood, gathering her purse. One of the men followed quickly, relieved for the exit. The other lingered, offering her a small nod before leaving as well. Soon, only the two of them remained at the table, the space between them suddenly wider without the buffer of others. You don't owe me anything, he said quietly. I know. Still, he continued, if you ever want to talk about more than wine and menus, I'd like that. She studied him for a moment. Not the money. Not the reputation. The man beneath the certainty. I don't want charity, she said. He nodded. Neither do I. She picked up the dessert plate. Then we understand each other. As she walked away, she felt something loosen in her chest. Not victory. Something better. Recognition. Behind her, the man remained seated long after the check arrived, staring at the untouched dessert, replaying the evening not as an insult endured, but as a lesson earned. The restaurant began to empty in the quiet way only places like this ever did. No rush, no scraping of chairs, just a gradual thinning of voices until each sound stood alone. The chandeliers dimmed slightly, the staff moved with the careful efficiency of people who knew the night was nearly done but the work was not. Plates were cleared, glasses collected, tables reset for a tomorrow that would look exactly like today, except it wouldn't. Not quite. She stood at the service station, counting receipts, her mind steady but alert. Moments like this always came with a delayed echo. The tension faded, then returned in softer waves, replaying fragments of conversation, glances, silences. She had learned to let them pass through her without taking root. The manager approached quietly. He's still here, he said. She didn't look up. I know. He asked for you again. She exhaled once. Did he? Yes, the manager said carefully. But I told him you'd decide. She finished counting, placed the receipts neatly in their slot, and nodded. Thank you. When she returned to the table, the room felt larger somehow. Emptier. The billionaire sat alone now, jacket draped over the back of his chair, sleeves rolled slightly as though he'd abandoned formality without realizing it. The untouched dessert had been cleared. Only a glass of water remained. He looked up when she approached. No surprise this time. No calculation. You stayed, he said. So did you. He smiled faintly. Habit. She gestured to the empty chairs. Your companions left early. They were uncomfortable. She nodded. People usually are when their certainty breaks. He considered that. You're not gentle. I'm honest. That's worse, he said quietly. Then, after a pause, and better. She waited. Silence no longer intimidated her. Silence was where truth surfaced. I made my fortune by believing I could read people, he said. Patterns. Signals. Tells. She said nothing. Tonight, he continued, I mistook confidence for competence. Familiarity for intelligence. I believed the uniform told me everything I needed to know. She met his gaze. It usually does. Until it doesn't. He nodded slowly. I owe you an apology. The words landed cleanly. No theatrics. No excuses. She studied his face, searching for deflection, irony, anything false. She found none. Accepted, she said. He seemed to release a breath he'd been holding. Good. He reached for his jacket again, but this time he didn't take out a card. He placed it back over his arm instead. You were right, he said. Dignity isn't tied to a title. She smiled faintly. Most people learn that too late. He looked around the restaurant, the polished surfaces, the quiet luxury. I've spent my life in rooms like this, he said, believing they were proof of something. And now? She asked. And now I wonder what I missed while I was busy being certain. She considered that. Wondering is a start. He nodded. Listening comes next. They sat in silence for a moment, not awkward, not heavy. Simply still. I won't insult you by offering rescue, he said finally. Or opportunity wrapped in obligation. She met his gaze, appreciative. Good. But, he continued, if you ever want to return to what you lost, not as charity, not as redemption, I know people who value resilience more than resumes. She tilted her head slightly. You mean people who learned tonight? Yes, he said. Including me. She thought of late nights, of borrowed books, of lectures replayed from memory because she couldn't afford access anymore. She thought of all the doors that had closed quietly, politely, without explanation. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask? He stood, slipping his jacket on, suddenly looking less like a fixture and more like a man who could leave without the room noticing. As he turned to go, he paused. For what it's worth, he said, you changed how I'll see the next person who walks into a room I control. She held his gaze. That matters. He nodded once, then walked away, his footsteps fading into the quiet. She returned to clearing tables, the routine grounding her. Another server passed by and whispered, You were incredible tonight. She smiled gently. I was myself. When the last guest left and the doors were locked, the staff gathered briefly near the bar, sharing the tired camaraderie of people who had survived another shift. Someone laughed. Someone complained about their feet. Life moved forward. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, the city greeted her without ceremony. Street lights hummed. A bus passed. Somewhere, music spilled from an open window. She walked slowly, savoring the quiet. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message. Then another. She stopped beneath a lamppost and checked the screen. An email. From a name she hadn't seen in years. A professor. Short. Direct. Curious. I heard you're back. If you're open to it, let's talk. She stared at the words for a long moment, the world narrowing to the glow of the screen. She smiled. Not because everything was suddenly fixed. Not because life had become easy. But because the truth had done what it always did when spoken without fear. It opened doors that arrogance had slammed shut. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and continued walking, her steps steady, her posture unbowed. Tomorrow, she would return to the restaurant. She would wear the same uniform. She would serve the same dishes. But the room would never see her the same way again. And neither would she.